I tried to be the good neighbor, but my generosity backfired. Their kids ate all my food and demanded to move into my house, so I filed for a restraining order. I've always been the type of person to help others whenever I can, just like my dad used to. I give away things we don't need to neighbors, charities, and homeless shelters. So when I met my neighbor, Christine, 38 female, and her 3 aggressive demanding kids, Max 14M, Sophia 12F, and Jacob 8M, I tried to help where I could. Christine was fun to chat with every now and then, but only in small doses, especially if her kids were around. Her kids had terrible boundaries. They just barge into our house, grab anything edible without asking, and treated everyone else's stuff like their own. As much as I'm happy to share, I can't stand that sort of disrespect. The sense of entitlement was off the charts. At one point, I made the mistake of telling the kids that if they wanted something from my house, they had to ask first, instead of just taking it. That turned out to be a huge error, because suddenly, they were over every single day, pestering us for money, snacks, drinks, or to use our pool. When I started telling them no, they would howl and scream like someone had committed a crime. Meanwhile, Christine would glare at me like I'd wronged her, just because I wouldn't cater to her children's demands. It's not like Christine couldn't provide for her kids. She had enough money to buy the fanciest cigarettes and all kinds of alcohol. But she would always complain that her kids ate everything she bought within a day. Eventually, when they moved out about a year ago, I was incredibly relieved. We didn't have to deal with their chaos on a daily basis anymore. Every now and then, I'd spot them around town. Last Easter, which also happened to be my close friend's son's birthday, we went to a party at a park nearby. My husband, Dan, 39M, and I took our 2 little kids. I grabbed myself a small chai latte from a coffee shop on the way, looking forward to enjoying it. Christine and her children were at the park too, and we exchanged some polite small talk. Max, who's now 14, approached me holding out a plastic Solo cup. He said he wanted some coffee. I told him it was tea, and honestly, I wasn't about to share my small, much-anticipated drink. He threw a fit. "Didn't you think I'd want some? Why didn't you get a bigger one?" His attitude ticked me off, so I told him, even if I had a large drink, there's no way I'd share with someone so ungrateful. In the commotion, I set the cup down on the table while I picked up my daughter Michelle, 3F. When I reached to get my tea again, I found it on the other side of the table, right by Max. Christine loudly asked, "How did your cup get over there?" Max just shrugged. Then a woman I didn't even know piped up and told me that Max was the one who'd picked up my cup and drank some. That was it. I'd had enough. I poured the rest of my tea onto the ground and tossed the cup in the trash. Max started screaming about how I should have just given the rest to him. Christine shot me a death glare, but of course, no apology was offered by either of them. My husband and I just decided to leave. 3 days later, Christine called, starting with some casual chatter, then getting right to the point. Could she and her kids move in with us, just until they found somewhere to go? I told her it wasn't going to happen. Suddenly, Max jumps on the phone, insisting I let them stay with us. I kept refusing and asked to speak with Christine, but she just handed the phone back onto speaker. Max wouldn't stop talking about how helpful they would be to us. That was the last straw. I hung up and blocked their number. Of course, Christine started calling all our mutual friends to ask the same thing. Everyone said no. None of us wanted the chaos. I later learned they'd gotten evicted for living in absolutely filthy conditions, with mice and cockroaches infesting their place. Update 1. Thanks to everyone who supported me through this. As much as I wanted nothing to do with Christine's family, I couldn't stand the thought of them living on the streets, especially with kids involved. I reached out to an old friend, Mark, 41M, who works at a shelter that helps families with kids. They got Christine and her children into the program, where they would have a safe place to sleep, their own 2 adjoining rooms, as soon as available, and meals provided 3 times a day with snacks. There are, of course, rules. They have to be in by a certain time every night, 9 p.m. Christine must submit to random substance checks, follow all the guidelines, and look for a job. All earnings Christine makes have to be saved up for their first and last month's rent, plus deposit. The kids get bused to and from school, and the shelter offers help with behavioral issues. Christine found out I was the one who got them into the shelter and wanted to thank me. I told her the best way to thank me was to make the most of this opportunity and leave my family and me alone. She'd said earlier she refused to live with her own mother because of her rules, so I'm not sure how she'll manage at the shelter. As far as I'm concerned, I've done more than enough. Now it's up to Christine to take responsibility for her family, or risk her kids being taken away by the state. Update 2. This situation just keeps getting crazier. There was another neighbor from our old street, Tanya, 63F. I felt we were pretty good friends until she started yelling at absolutely anyone who dared park in front of her house. She didn't even have a driveway. I really tried to understand her stress, but it started to get out of hand, especially when she flipped out at me for telling her granddaughter to mind her own business, instead of constantly asking us for food, stuff, or money, and making rude jokes. We were in the middle of moving when Dan was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Our friends and family rallied around to help us pack up and move to our new home, including my cousin Leo, 36M, who is a police officer. One day he parked in front of Tanya's house, and she lost it, screaming because she had to park further up the street. That really set me off. I decided on some admittedly petty revenge. I had Leo bring his extra car and park it in front of Tanya's house while she was at work. Every few days we'd move it around. She didn't know who it belonged to, and she couldn't complain to anyone. I know it was childish, but it felt deserved at the time. Update 3. And then there was the final straw, a restraining order. Christine, who I once considered a friend and neighbor, had rented the house next to us when we bought ours. While we were moving in and cleaning up, Christine came over, introduced herself, and immediately started pointing at things in our backyard. She said the previous owners told her she could have firewood. So when could she have it? I told her no. The owners, Gina and Sam, the couple we bought from, had specifically told us the firewood was part of the sale. Christine insisted she needed it, so I called Sam, who said she was making it up. Then Christine claimed they'd let her and her kids use our pool anytime they wished. Sam said that wasn't true either. The gates and security cameras were there for a reason. Then Christine wanted the rolled-up carpet and a big armoire in the house, saying the previous owners had left it for her. There was no armoire. The carpet was ours, just moved by the movers. Once she saw none of her asking worked, she awkwardly left. Over the next months, I rarely saw her, except for hearing her loud voice yelling at her kids, who she only got on weekends and holidays. I kept trying to help, especially after seeing the kids' financial struggles. I bought them school clothes, gave them food, and the odd bag of groceries. But Christine never looked for a job, even as she had the kids more often. They would knock on our doors shamelessly, begging for food and anything else. When they finally moved out, I thought we would have peace, but they never really left, showing up without warning as if nothing changed. Max and Sophia especially had huge appetites. They would take food off our plates or ask, with their fingers pointing straight at the food, "Are you going to finish that?" Eventually, I set boundaries and told them not to come over anymore. For a time, it worked. Until the Easter party, that is. Max asked me for my tea from Dunkin', again, a small drink, and after I refused, I caught him drinking from it the second my back was turned. That was it for the friendship. Add point, the restraining order didn't slow them down at all. They called again, asking to move in with us. Max tried to act smooth, but I put my foot down, said no one more time, and told Christine not to ask again. I made it clear the friendship was over and to stay away. I said the parent should be the one calling, not the child. A couple of months ago, on my birthday, my sister and her family came to visit. We went out to our favorite Mexican restaurant, 8 of us in total. Suddenly, I heard voices I hoped never to hear again. Christine and her kids were there. They said hi, then immediately asked if they could join our table. My husband quickly told them we had more family coming and it wasn't possible. They sat at their own table, but kept staring over at us. My sister had given me a nice designer handbag for my birthday. Max wandered over and asked, "What's Gucci?" It took me a minute to realize he meant Gucci. He later returned to say he'd checked the price online and that I should return it and give the money to them for their rent. I was stunned. I told him, "It's not my job to support your family." I went over and told Christine, firmly but quietly, this was the final warning. Leave us alone. A few days later, I was getting on the freeway and saw 2 women and a child standing by a broken-down car. I stopped to help, and much to my dismay, realized it was Christine and her kids. I was relieved not to see Max until Christine said she was going to wake him because he was sleeping in the back seat. I agreed to give them a ride to the nearest McDonald's so they wouldn't be stranded on the freeway. I told Christine Max would have to sit next to me. I didn't trust him not to wreck my back seat. Right away, Max asked me to get him 2 meals at McDonald's. I refused, telling him I couldn't afford it. He got angry, pointing at my new bag and asking if that was another one. I told him and Christine to get out of my car after he started yelling at me and grabbed at my purse. Before I could even pull off, a highway patrol car showed up behind us. I was glad. Finally, someone else could deal with their drama. Then, out of nowhere, Christine yanked my arm, squeezing so hard she broke the skin and left a massive bruise, all while demanding I pretend to be driving their car so she could take mine instead. I screamed for the officer, showed him my arm, and told him everything. He immediately told them to get out of my car. Christine was arrested for not having a license and failed the sobriety test. I filed for restraining orders immediately after that. The judge saw photos of my arm and granted the motion. That wraps up the whole story. This story really shows the limits of neighborly generosity and how certain people will exploit any kindness shown to them. Sometimes it's necessary to draw firm boundaries, even if that means cutting people out of your life entirely. Here is a question for you. Would you have continued trying to help a neighbor like Christine and her family, or would you have cut them off sooner? Where do you draw the line between helping and being taken advantage of? Share your thoughts below.